بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we're still reading in the introduction of Riyad Saliheen. قال الإمام النووي رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا به وبكم آمين. وألتزم فيه ألا أذكر إلا حديثا صحيحا من الواضحات مضافا إلى الكتب الصحيحة المشهورات وأصدر الأبواب من القرآن العزيز بآيات كريمات وأوشح ما يحتاج إلى ضبط أو شرح معنى خفي بنفائس من التنبيهات. وإذا قلت في آخر حديث متفق عليه فمعناه رواه البخاري ومسلم. He says rahimahullah ta'ala, and he's still talking about what this book is going to contain, and then he mentions a condition that he has put for himself, a condition, a criteria that he has put for himself. He says وَأَلْتَزِمُ فِيهِ أَلَّا أَذْكُرَ إِلَّا حَدِيثًا صَحِيحًا مِنَ الْوَاضِحَاتِ. The first condition is that any hadith that he's going to mention in this book is going to be a reliable hadith. لا أذكر في إلا حديثا صحيحا. Only going to include in this book a hadith that are reliable. And as we mentioned yesterday, that this is very important for us to know, because he's repeating that now second time, that every hadith in this book is considered reliable according to Imam al-Nawawi. According to him, the hadith is reliable. And as we mentioned yesterday, that of course doesn't take away from the fact that sometimes the ulama may disagree about the authenticity of a particular hadith. But it is important to know that every hadith in this book is considered reliable according to this great hadith scholar, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah. The second condition that he says is min al-wadihat, that every hadith that he's going to put in here is going to have a clear meaning. It's not going to have an ambiguous meaning. It's going to be a clear hadith. And that's because, the reason for that is because he intended to compile this book not just for the ulama, but for the lay people, for everybody's benefit. And that's why he selected from thousands and thousands of ahadith those that convey the meaning in the most clear possible way. Then he says, مُضَافًا إِلَى الْكُتُبِ الصَّحِيحَةِ الْمَشْهُورَاتِ. The third condition is that he is always going to mention the source of the hadith. And the source of the hadith is always going to be a well-known source, not some source that very few people have heard about. He's going to attribute them to the well-known sources of hadith. وَأُصَدِّرَ الْأَبْوَابَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ الْعَزِيزِ بِآيَاتٍ كَرِيمَاتٍ. And I'm going to begin every chapter of this book with some ayat of the Qur'an, some noble ayat of the Qur'an. So even though this is a book of hadith, he is going to begin every chapter of the book with some ayat of the Qur'an that are related to the topic of that chapter, and then he will follow that up with the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he says, وَأُوَشِّحَ مَا يَحْتَاجُ إِلَى ضَبْطٍ أَوْ شَرْحِ مَعْنًى خَفِيٍّ بِنَفَائِسَ مِنَ التَّنْبِيهَاتِ. And I'm also going to put as footnotes any word that needs to be explained. I'm going to explain it with a short, brief explanation if there's any words that need to be explained, or if there is any hidden meaning that needs to be pointed out. وَإِذَا قُلْتُ فِي آخِرِ حَدِيثٍ مُتَّفَقٌ عَلَيْهِ فَمَعْنَاهُ رَوَاهُ الْبُخَارِيُّ وَمُسْلِمٌ. And if I say at the end of any hadith that it's agreed upon, muttafaqun alayh, agreed upon, then that means that the hadith is recorded by al-Bukhari and Muslim. Agreed upon does not mean that every book of hadith mentions it. Agreed upon does not mean that all the 6 books of hadith mention it. Agreed upon means that both Bukhari and Muslim, these two only, have included it in their Sahih collections. But then the question arises, and why do you call it agreed upon? It's not agreed upon, it's just agreed upon by 2 scholars. Why do you give the impression that everybody has agreed upon this when only 2 scholars have agreed upon it? And the answer to that is because the entire ummah has agreed upon the reliability of Bukhari and Muslim. Because the ummah as a whole has agreed upon the fact that everything in Bukhari and Muslim that has an unbroken chain going back to the Prophet ﷺ is reliable, trustworthy, and authentic. And therefore, if something is found in both Bukhari and Muslim, then that is agreed upon to be an authentic statement or action of the Prophet ﷺ. Now here, one thing that I forgot to point out, when he says مُضَافًا إِلَى الْكُتُبِ الصَّحِيحَةِ الْمَشْهُورَاتِ, that he's going to always mention the source of the hadith, and he's always going to attribute them to well-known books. He says al-kutub al-sahiha, that he's going to attribute them to authentic books of hadith. Authentic books of hadith. So does that mean that in this book, Riyad al-Saliheen, we only have a hadith from Bukhari and Muslim? No. We have in this book a hadith from Abu Dawood and Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah and Nasa'i and Musnad of Imam Ahmad and Darimi and many other books of hadith. So are all of these ahadith books completely authentic? No, we know that in Tirmidhi there are many weak ahadith. In Musnad of Imam Ahmad there's many weak ahadith. In every book of hadith there are authentic hadith and weak hadith out of these 6 books collections, except for Bukhari and Muslim. So then why does he call them al-kutub al-sahiha? He calls them kutub al-sahiha, authentic books, for the same reason that those 6 books have the well-known title as-sahah as-sitta, as-sahah as-sitta, the 6 authentic books of hadith. Why are they called the 6 authentic books of hadith, even though they have weak hadith in them? The answer is because the majority of the ahadith in those books are authentic. The majority of the ahadith in those collections, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Nasa'i, are authentic. And therefore, al-kull ya'khudhu hukm al-ghalib. هذا حكم على الغالب. Because majority of the ahadith are authentic, therefore, those books are called al-kutub al-sahiha as-sitta or as-sahah as-sitta. So these are the conditions that he has put forward for himself. And the last piece that he mentions here will close the introduction, inshallah, the last few lines. He says, وأرجو إن تم هذا الكتاب أن يكون سائقا للمعتني به إلى الخيرات حاجزا له عن أنواع القبائح والمهلكات وأنا سائل أخا انتفع بشيء منه أن يدعو لي ولوالدي ولمشايخي وسائر أحبابنا والمسلمين أجمعين وعلى الله الكريم اعتمادي وإليه تفويضي واستنادي وحسبي الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العزيز الحكيم. He says that I hope that if this book comes to a completion, which shows that he's writing this introduction before completing the book. He's saying, I hope that if this book I'm able to complete it, that it would be a driving force for someone who wishes to do good in his life, a motivation for someone to do good in his life, and something that will become a shield for people from falling into those things that are ugly and those things that are destructive. And I request my brother who benefits from anything in this book to please make dua for me. And make dua for my parents and my teachers and all of my beloveds and all of the Muslimin. And so we make dua for him that Allah Azza wa Jal accept from Imam al-Nawawi, may Allah Azza wa Jal accept from him and his parents and his teachers and all of those that were beloved to him, and may Allah Azza wa Jal accept from all the Muslims ajma'een. And then finally he says, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَرِيمِ اعْتِمَادِي, that I put my trust upon Allah and Allah alone. وَإِلَيْهِ تَفْوِيضِي وَاسْتِنَادِي, and I assign my affairs to him completely. وَحَسْبِيَ اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ, and Allah is sufficient for me, and what an excellent being to rely upon. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَكِيمِ, and there is no might nor power except by Allah, the mighty, the wise. Now here he ends by saying لَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَكِيمِ, whereas the more popular phrase is what? لَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْعَظِيمِ. So why does he not say Al-Ali Al-Azim? Well, because the authentic version of this dhikr is La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aziz al-hakim. Both narrations are there from the Prophet ﷺ. In one narration he said La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. In another narration he said La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aziz al-hakim. The second one is more stronger than the first one. So that's why he chooses that one. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wa sallallahu wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Couple of announcements inshaAllah ta'ala.